Soren Kierkegaard, Training in Christianity, Part 1, Section 1. The Invitation, 3 Interpretations. Come hither, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. For revival and increase of inwardness, by Anticlimacus. Procul, o procul este profani. Editor's Preface. In this little book, which originated in the year 1848, the requirement for being a Christian is strained by the pseudonym to the highest pitch of ideality. Yet indeed the requirement ought to be uttered, plainly set forth, and heard. There must be no abatement of the requirement, not to speak of the suppression of it, instead of making admission and acknowledgement on one's own behalf. The footnote reads, the admission, namely, that one, alas, is not fulfilling the requirement. This is the admission Soren Kierkegaard was, from this time on, constantly urging the Church to make through its chief bishop, the acknowledgement that it was not a fair exponent of Christianity, but a compromise with worldliness, as it remains as it is. This would at least be honesty, and that, he thought, was the only way to justify the Church, so long as it remains as it is. On his own behalf, he made this admission again and again, and not only privately in his journals, but publicly in his works, that he was not yet truly a Christian, but only in the process of becoming one. To return to the text. The requirement must be heard, and I understand what is said as addressed solely to me, that I might learn not only to take refuge in grace, but to take refuge in such a way as to make use of grace. Soren Kierkegaard. Invocation. It is 800 years and more since Jesus Christ walked here on earth. But this is not an event like other events, which only when they are bygone pass over into history, and then as events long bygone pass over into forgetfulness. No, his presence here on earth never becomes a bygone event, and never becomes more and more bygone, in case faith is to be found on earth. And if not, then indeed, at that very instant, it is a long, long time since he lived. But so long as there is a believer, such a one must, in order to become such, have been, and as a believer must continue to be, just as contemporary with his presence on earth as were those first contemporaries. This contemporaneousness is the condition of faith, and more closely defined, it is faith. O Lord Jesus Christ, would that we might also be contemporary with thee, see thee in thy true form and in the actual environment in which thou didst walk here on earth, not in the form in which an empty and meaningless tradition, or a thoughtless and superstitious, or a gossipy historical tradition has deformed thee. For it is not in the form of abasement the believer sees thee, and it cannot possibly be in the form of glory, in which no man has yet seen thee. Would that we might see thee as thou art, and wast, and wilt be, until thy return in glory. See thee as the sign of the offense, and the object of faith, the lowly man, and yet the Saviour and Redeemer of the race, who out of love came to earth in order to seek the lost, in order to suffer and to die, and yet sorely troubled as thou wast, alas, at every step thou didst take upon earth, every time thou didst stretch out thy hand to perform signs and wonders, and every time, without moving a hand, thou didst suffer defenselessly the opposition of men, again and again, thou wast constrained to repeat, blessed is he whosoever is not offended in me. Would that we might see thee thus, and then for all this we might not be offended in thee. Come hither, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, that the one who has help to give is the one who says, come hither. What love is this? There is love in the act of a man who is able to help and does help him who begs for help. But for one to offer help, and to offer it all, yes, and precisely to all such as can do nothing to help in return, to offer it, no, to shout it out, as if the helper was the one who needed help, as if in fact he who is able and willing to help all was himself in a sense a needy one, in that he feels an urge and consequently need to help, need of the sufferer in order to help him. Section 1 of the first part. Come hither. There is nothing wonderful in the fact that when one is in danger and in need of help, perhaps of speedy instant help, he shouts, come hither. Neither is it wonderful that a quack shouts out, come hither, I heal all diseases. In the instance of the quack, there is only too much truth in the falsehood that the physician has need of the sick man. Come hither, all ye that can pay for healing at an exorbitant price, or at least for physic. Here is medicine for everybody who can pay. Come hither, come hither. But commonly it is understood that one who is able to help must be sought out. And when one has found him, it may be difficult to gain access to him. One must perhaps implore him for a long time. And when one has implored him for a long time, he may perhaps at last be moved. That is, he sets a high value upon himself. And when sometimes he declines to receive any pay or magnanimously relinquishes claim to it, this merely expresses the value he attaches to himself. He, on the other hand, who made the great self-surrender, here surrenders himself anew. He himself it is that seeks them that stand in need of help. It is he himself that goes about and calling them, almost beseeching them, says, come hither. He, the only one who is able to help, and to help with the only thing needful, to save from the sickness, which in the truest sense is mortal, does not wait for people to come to him, but he comes of his own accord, uncalled for he indeed it is that calls them, that offers help. And what help? That simple wise man too of ancient times. The footnote reads, Socrates, who took no fees for instruction he imparted. Kierkegaard was constantly engrossed by the figure of Socrates. To return to the text, that simple wise man, too, of ancient times, was just as infinitely right as the majority who do the opposite are wrong, in that he did not set a high value upon himself or his instruction, though it is true that, in another sense, he thereby gave expression with a noble pride to the incommensurability of the pay. But he was not so deeply concerned through love of men that he begged anyone to come to him, and he behaved as he did, shall I say, in spite of the fact, or because he was not altogether certain what his help really amounted to. For the more certain one is that his help is the only help, just so much more reason he has, humanly speaking, to make it dear. And the less certain he is, so much the more reason he has to offer with great alacrity such help as he disposes of, for the sake of accomplishing something at least. But he who calls himself the Saviour and knows himself to be such, says with deep concern, come hither. Come hither all ye, wonderful. For that one who perhaps is impotent to give help to a single soul, that he with lusty lungs should invite all, is not so wonderful, human nature being what it is. But when one is perfectly certain that he can help, when one is willing, moreover, to devote oneself entirely to this cause and to make every sacrifice, it is usual at least to reserve the liberty of selecting the objects of one's care. However willing a person may be, still it is not everyone he would help. He would not sacrifice himself to that extent. But he, the only one who can truly help, the only one who can truly help all, and so the only one who truly can invite all, he stipulates no condition at all. This word, which was as though coined for him from the foundation of the world, he accordingly utters, "Come hither, all." O human self-sacrifice, even at thy fairest and noblest, when we admire thee most, there is still one act of kindness beyond thee, one act of sacrifice beyond thee, the sacrifice of every determinant of one's own ego, so that in the willingness to help there is not the least prejudice of partiality. What loving kindness, thus to set no price upon oneself, entirely to forget oneself, to forget that it is he who helps, entirely blind to the question who it is one helps, seeing with infinite clearness only that it is a sufferer, whoever he may be, thus to will unconditionally to help all. Alas, in this respect, so different from us all. Come hither to me. Wonderful. For human compassion does indeed do something for them that labor and are heavy laden. One feeds the hungry, clothes the naked, gives alms, builds charitable institutions, and, if the compassion is more heartfelt, one also visits them that labor and are heavy laden. But to invite them to come to us, that is a thing that cannot be done. It would involve a change in all our household and manner of life. It is not possible while one is living in abundance, or at least in joy and gladness, to live and dwell together in the same house, in a common house and in daily intercourse, with the poor and wretched, with them that labor and are heavy laden. In order to be able to invite them thus, one must live entirely in the same way, as poor as the poorest, as slightly regarded as the lowliest man of the people, familiar with life's sorrow and anguish, sharing completely the same conditions as they whom one invites to one's home, namely, they that labor and are heavy laden. If a man will invite the sufferer to come to him, he must either alter his condition in likeness to the sufferer's, or the sufferer's in likeness to his own. Otherwise, the difference will be all the more glaring by reason of the contrast. And if a man will invite all sufferers to come to him, for with a single individual one can make an exception and alter his condition, it can be done in only one way, by altering one's own condition in likeness to theirs, if originally it was not adapted to this end, as was the case with him who says, "Come hither to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden." This he said, and they that lived with him beheld, and lo, there is not the very least thing in his life which contradicts it. With the silent and veracious eloquence of deeds his life expresses, even if he had never given utterance to these words, "Come hither to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden." He is true to his word. He is what he says, and in this sense, he also, he is the word. All ye that labor and are heavy laden. Wonderful. The only thing he is concerned about is that there might be a single one of those that labor and are heavy laden who fail to hear the invitation. As for the danger that too many might come, he had no fear of it. Oh, where the heart-room is, there house-room always is to be found. But where there is ever heart-room, if not in his heart? How the individual will understand the invitation, he leaves to the individual himself. His conscience is clear. He has invited all them that labor and are heavy laden. But what then is it to labor and to be heavy laden? Why does he not explain it more precisely, so that one may know exactly who it is he means? Why is he so laconic? O thou petty man, he is so laconic in order not to be petty. Thou illiberal man, he is so laconic in order not to be illiberal. It is the part of love, for love is towards all, to prevent that there might be a single person who is thrown into alarm by pondering whether he also is among the invited. and he who might require a closer definition? Would he not be a self-loving person, reckoning that this ought especially to take care of his case and apply to him, without considering that the more of such closer and closer definitions there were, just so much the more inevitable that there must be individuals for whom it became more and more indefinite, whether they are the invited. O man, why doth thine eye look only to its own? Why is it evil because he is good? The invitation to all throws open the inviter's arms, and there he stands, an everlasting picture. So soon as the closer definition is introduced, which perhaps might help the individual to another sort of certainty, the inviter has a different aspect, and there passes over him, as it were, a fleeting shadow of change. I will give thee rest. Wonderful. For these words, come hither to me, must thus be understood to mean, abide with me, I am that rest, or to abide with me is rest. So it is not as in other instances, where the helper who says, come hither, must thereupon say, go hence again, declaring to each individual severally where the helper he needs is to be found, where there grows the pain-quenching herb which can heal him, or where the tranquil place is where he can cease from labor, or where is that happier region of the world where one is not heavy laden. No, he who opens his arms and invites all. Oh, in case all that labor and are heavy laden were to come to him, he would embrace them in his arms and say, abide with me, for in abiding with me, there is rest. The helper is the help. Oh, wonderful! He who invites all and would help all has a way of treating the sick just as if it were intended for each several one, as if each patient he deals with were the only one. Commonly, a physician must divide himself among his many patients, who, however many they are very far from being all. He prescribes the medicine, tells what is to be done, how it is to be used, and then he departs to another patient. Or else, in case the patient has come to see him, he lets them depart. The physician cannot remain sitting all the day long beside one patient. Still less can he have all his sick people in his own home, and yet sit all the day long beside one patient, without neglecting the others. Hence, in this case, the helper and the help are not one and the same thing. The patient retains beside him all the day long the help which the physician prescribes, so as to use it constantly, whereas the physician sees him only now and then, and only now and then does he see the physician. But when the helper is the help, he must remain with the patient all the day long, or the patient with him. Oh, wonderful that it is this very helper who invites all. Section 2. Come hither, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. What prodigious multiplicity, what almost boundless diversity among the people invited! For a man, even a mere man, can well enough attempt to conceive of some of the individual differences, but the inviter must invite all, and yet every one severally as an individual. So the invitation fares forth along frequented roads and along the solitary paths, along the most solitary, aye, where there is a path so solitary that only one knows it, one single person, or no one at all, so that there is only one footprint, that of the luckless man who fled along that path in his misery. No other indication whatsoever, and no indication that in following that path one might return again. Even there the invitation penetrates, finding its own way back easily and surely, most easily when it bears the fugitive back with it to the inviter. Come hither, all ye, and thou, and thou, and thou too, most solitary of all fugitives. Thus the invitation fares forth, and wherever there is a parting of the ways, it stops and calls aloud, Like the trumpet call of the warrior, which turns to all four quarters of the world, so the invitation resounds wherever there is a parting of the ways, and with no uncertain sound, for who then would come, but with the unequivocal sureness of eternity. It halts at the crossways, where suffering temporal and earthly has planted its cross, and there it calls aloud, "Come hither, all ye poor and miserable, ye who in poverty must toil to ensure for yourselves not a carefree, but a toilsome future. Oh, the bitter contradiction, to have to toil to attain what one groans under, what one flees from. Ye who are despised and disdained, about whose existence none is concerned, not a single one, not even so much as for the beasts, which have a higher value. Ye sick, lame, deaf, blind, crippled, come hither. Ye bedridden, yea, come ye also hither, for the invitation makes bold to bid the bedridden, come. Ye lepers, for the invitation abolishes every barrier of difference in order to bring all together. It proposes to make amends for the inequalities chargeable to the difference which allots one a place as a ruler over millions, possessing all the favors of fortune, and relegates another to the desert. And why? Oh, the cruelty of it. Because, oh, cruel human logic, because he is miserable, indescribably miserable. Consequently, for this further reason, because he craves help, or at least compassion, and consequently for this further reason, because human compassion is a paltry invention, cruel where the need of compassion is most evident, and compassionate only when, in a true sense, it is not compassion. Ye sick of heart, ye who only through pain learn to know that a man has a heart in a sense quite different from the man of a beast, and learn what it means to suffer in that part. Learn how it is that the physician might be right in declaring that one's heart is sound, while nevertheless he is heart sick. Ye whom unfaithfulness deceived, and then human sympathy, for human sympathy is seldom in delay, made a target for mockery. All ye that have been discriminated against, wronged, offended, and ill-used, all ye noble ones who, as everybody can tell you, deservedly reap the reward of ingratitude. For why were ye foolish enough to be noble? Why stupid enough to be kindly, disinterested, and faithful? All ye victims of cunning and deceit, and backbiting and envy, whose baseness singled out and cowardice left in the lurch. Whether ye be sacrificed in remote and lowly places, whither ye have crept away to die, or whether ye be trampled underfoot by the thronging human crowd, where no one inquires what right ye have on your side, no one inquires what wrong ye suffer, or where the smart of your suffering is, or how ye smart under it, while the throng replete with animal health tramples you in the dust. Come hither. This invitation halts at the parting of the ways, where death parts from life. Come hither, all ye sorrowful, all ye that travail in vain and are sore troubled. For it is true that there is rest in the grave, but to sit beside a grave, to stand by a grave, or to visit a grave, all that is not yet to lie in the grave, and to scan again and again the production of one's own pen, which one knows by heart, the inscription which one placed there oneself, and which the man himself can best understand, telling who lies buried here, that, alas, is not to lie buried there oneself. In the grave there is rest, but beside the grave there is no rest. The meaning of it is, hitherto and no further. Then one can go home. But often as you return to that grave, day after day, whether in thought or on foot, one gets no further, not one step from that spot. And this is very exhausting, far from expressing rest. Come ye therefore hither. Here is the path along which one goes farther. Here is rest beside the grave, rest from the pain of loss, or rest in the pain of loss. With him who eternally reunites the separated, more firmly than nature unites parents and children, children and parents. Alas, they were parted. More inwardly than the priest unites husband and wife. Alas, separation occurred. More indissolubly than the bond of friendship unites friend with friend. Alas, that was dissolved. Separation everywhere forced its way between, bringing sorrow and unrest. But here is rest. Come ye who are accounted dead to human society, yet not missed and not mourned, not buried, although dead, that is, belonging neither to death, to life, not to death. Ye, alas, to whom human society cruelly closed its doors, and yet for whom no grave mercifully opened. Come ye then hither. Here is rest, and here is life. The invitation halts at the parting of the ways, where the path of sin deviates from the hedged road of innocence. O come hither, ye who are so near to him, a single step on the other path, and ye are so endlessly far from him. It may well be, perhaps, that ye have not felt as yet the need of rest, and hardly understand what it means. Yet follow nevertheless the invitation, so that the inviter might save you from a state which only with great difficulty and peril ye might be saved out of, so that the saved ye might abide with him, who is the Saviour of all men, including the innocent. For if it were possible that somewhere there might be found innocence entirely unsullied, why should it not also require a Saviour who could preserve it safe from the evil one? The invitation halts at the parting of the ways, where the path of sin veers more deeply into sin. Come hither, all ye that have strayed and lost your way, whatever your error and sin might have been, whether it be one in which human eyes was more pardonable and yet perhaps more dreadful, or one more dreadful in human eyes and yet perhaps more pardonable, one which was revealed here on earth, or one which is concealed here yet known in heaven. Did ye find forgiveness here on earth, and yet find no rest in your inward mind? Or found ye no forgiveness because ye sought it not, or sought it in vain? Oh, turn about and come hither. Here is rest. The invitation halts at the parting of the ways, where the path of sin again veers for the last time and is lost to view in perdition. Oh, turn about, come hither. Shrink not at the difficulty of the journey back, however hard it may be. Fear not the toilsome path of conversion, however laboriously it leads to salvation. Whereas sin, with winged speed, with ever-increasing velocity, leads onward or downward, so easily and with such indescribable ease, as easily indeed as when a horse, relieved entirely of the strain of pulling, cannot with all his might bring the wagon to a halt, which thrusts him into the abyss. Be not in despair at every relapse, which the God of patience possesses patience enough to forgive, and which a sinner might well have patience enough to be humbled under. Nay, fear nothing and despair not. He who says, "Come hither," is with you on your way. From him come help and forgiveness in the path of conversion, which leads to him, and with him there is rest. Come hither, all of you. With him is rest, and he makes no difficulties. He does but one thing: he opens his arms. He will not first, as righteous people do, alas, even when they are willing to help. He will not first ask thee, art thou not after all to blame for thy misfortune? Hast thou, in fact, no cause for self-reproach? It is so easy, so human to judge after the outward appearance, after the result. When a person is a cripple or deformed or has an unprepossessing appearance, to judge that ergo he is a bad man. When a person fares badly in the world so that he is brought to ruin or goes downhill, then to judge that ergo he is a vicious man. Oh, It is such an exquisite invention of cruel pleasure to enhance the consciousness of one's own righteousness in contrast with a sufferer, by explaining that his suffering is God's condign punishment, that one hardly even dares to help him, or by challenging him with that condemning question which flatters one's own righteousness in the very act of helping him. But he will put no such questions to thee. He will not be thy benefactor in so cruel a fashion. If thou thyself art conscious of being a sinner, he will not inquire of thee about it. The bruised reed he will not further break, but he will raise thee up if thou wilt attach thyself to him. He will not single thee out by contrast, holding thee apart from him, so that thy sin will seem still the more dreadful. He will grant thee a hiding place within him, and once hidden in him, he will hide thy sins. For he is the friend of sinners. When it is questioned of a sinner, he does not merely stand still, open his arms and say, "Come hither." No, he stands there and waits, as the father of the lost son waited. Rather, he does not stand and wait. He goes forth to seek, as the shepherd sought the lost sheep, as the woman sought the lost coin. He goes, yet no, he has gone, but infinitely further than any shepherd or any woman. He went, in sooth, the infinitely long way from being God to becoming man. And that way he went in search of sinners. Section 3. Come hither to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Come hither! For he assumes that they that labor and are heavy laden feel the burden all too heavy, the labor heavy, and now stand in perplexity, heaving sighs, one glancing searchingly around to see if no help is to be found, another with eyes bent down upon the ground because he descried no comfort, a third gazing upward as though from heaven it still must come, but all of them seeking. Therefore he says, come hither. Him who has ceased to seek and to sorrow he does not invite. Come hither. For he, the inviter, knows it as a sign of true suffering that one goes apart to brood alone in disconsolate silence, lacking the courage to confide in anyone, not to say the confidence to hope for help. Alas, that demoniac was not the only person possessed by a dumb spirit. Suffering which does not begin by making the sufferer dumb does not amount to much, no more than love which does not make the lover silent. Sufferers whose tongues run easily over the story of their sufferings neither labor nor are heavy laden. Lo, for this reason the inviter dare not wait till they that labor and are heavy laden come to him of their own accord. He himself lovingly summons them. All his willingness to help would perhaps be no help at all if he did not utter this word and thereby take the first step. For in this summons, come unto me, it is he in fact that comes to them. Oh, human compassion. Perhaps it may sometimes indicate praiseworthy self-restraint, perhaps also sometimes a genuine and heartfelt sympathy, when thou refrainest from questioning a man who, as may be surmised, is constantly brooding over a hidden suffering. Yet how often it may be only worldly wisdom which has no desire to learn to know too much. O human compassion, how often was it merely a curiosity, not a compassion, which prompted thee to venture to penetrate a sufferer's secret? And what burden did thou feelst to be, almost a punishment upon thy curiosity, when he followed thine invitation and came to thee? But he who utters this saving word, come hither, was not deceived in himself when he uttered the word, neither will he deceive thee when thou comest to him to find rest by casting thy burden upon him. He follows the prompting of his heart in uttering it, and his heart accompanies, follows the word. Follow then thou the word, and it will accompany thee. back to his heart. It is a matter, of course, the one thing that follows the other. Oh, that thou wouldst follow the invitation. Come hither. For he assumes that they that labor and are heavy laden are so tired and exhausted, in a state of swoon, that they have forgotten again, as in a stupor, that there is comfort, or alas, he knows that it is only too true that there is no comfort and help unless it is sought in him. And so he has to call them to come hither. Come hither! For it is characteristic of every society that it possesses a token or a sign of some sort by which one who is a member can be recognized. When a young girl is adorned in a certain manner, one knows that she is on her way to a ball. Come hither, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. Come hither. Thou dost not need to wear a distinctive outward and visible mark. Come also with anointed head and a face newly washed, if only thou dost inwardly labor and are heavy laden. Come hither. O stand not still, considering the matter. Consider rather, O consider that for every instant thou standest still after hearing the invitation, thou wilt in the next instant hear its call fainter and fainter, and thus be withdrawing to a distance, though thou be standing at the same spot. Come hither. Oh, however tired and weary thou art with thy labor, or with the long quest in search for help and salvation, although it seem to thee as if thou couldst not follow one step further, or hold out a moment longer without sinking to the ground. Oh, but this one step more, and here is rest. Come hither. Ah, if there were only one so wretched that he could not come, a sigh is enough. To sigh for him is also to come hither.